Hello and welcome to a very special episode of The Modern Nerd. I am Sir Slice.
Iams merchandise.
I'm GJC.
I'm Jeremy.
And we are, as always, massive nerds. So, as you guys can tell, we have a fourth person here. Ladies and gentlemen, and anybody watching at home, to the millions around the world tuning in, this is Jeremy Vickery. He has worked on many different things. For a quick rundown, such credits, I'm sorry, lighting director slash engineer. Is that kind of correct for
Lighting
overarching?
artist.
Lighting
Lighting
artist.
artist.
We'll go with lighting artist on such titles as The Incredibles, Cars, Ratatouille, Wall-E, Brave, Inside Out, such video games as The Assassin's Creed Odyssey, Uncharted, Days Gone, and TV shows such as Westworld and the one we're here to talk about, the brand new Amazon Prime's Fallout TV show. He's worked on other freelance credits as Lego, Sony, Disney, Mattel, and Swatch, and just so many more. So, Jeremy, thank you so much for joining us and taking the time. Kind of making the time as we kind of messed up the timing earlier, but it's all working out. Let's not talk about it, okay? Um, so thank you again. And always, thank you, George and Dan, for doing this. And if you're watching at home, go ahead, click that like and subscribe. There's
give
going
it
to
a
be
thumbs up.
a lot more stuff. Give us a,
Fallout Boy
and we're going
thumbs
to have
up.
more like this.
Oh, Vault Boy.
So, Jeremy, why don't you kind of give us a really quick breakdown of what exactly you do as a lighting artist on different movies and shows and that kind of stuff?
All right, so I got into lighting by accident many years ago. So I started in computer animation 27 years ago. It's been a really long time. And
Wow.
I started working in kids' TV kind of as a generalist, doing a lot of different roles. And I discovered 3D lighting kind of by accident by having to put lights to make the 3D characters and environments that I was working on. And before I knew it, I became the lighting supervisor on a very unknown film. I lived in Atlanta on this film called Delgo back in the year 2000. And most people have never seen it. Don't see it. It's not worth watching. But it was a good experience for me to learn and grow. And I saw that Pixar was hiring in 2003. I had already applied there 6 different times and gotten rejection letters every single time, or 5 different times. And the sixth time, they were looking for lighting artists, and I was doing lighting. So I applied, and to my great surprise, I got in the door. So that was on The Incredibles in 2003. And a lighting artist job is tied to cinematography. So we have three-dimensional worlds. It's more like puppetry than it is like drawing and traditional animation that people understand. The 3D worlds, we have these environments, and we'll put a sun, and we'll put bounce lights, and we'll have rim lights, and all these different things to aid the composition of the shot. So anything that you can see, like in my lighting setup right now, I have a light source coming from the left, and there's a shadow, and there's a rim light from behind, and there's a little glow light back here, and another light back here. That's what a lighting artist job does, is compose the image using light. Where are the shadows? Where is the light? Where are the reflections? How do all the different materials in this environment show you what you're looking at on screen? So we're working on composition. As a lighting artist, we just put in the little details, put in the lights. But as a lighting director, I kind of worked my way up to a lighting supervisor and lighting director position. I'm involved in the creative process of how do we tell the story? What are the worlds? What time of day is it? How do we add the mood to this world? And so I work with, on Fallout in particular, I was working with the director of photography and the director themselves, Jonathan Nolan, and the different people that are the directors, and saying, what do you want to tell, and how can we use light to aid this story? I was involved in virtual production. So I was the virtual production lighting supervisor for the parts that I worked on the show. And so we had physical lights on set and virtual lights. We'll talk more about this as to what that is, but having to merge virtual worlds and real worlds into one cohesive set so that what you see, the final picture on screen, looks like it's all one. You can't tell where our virtual sets start, where the real set ends, and the virtual one begins. So that was a really fast introduction to what lighting is like.
Cool.
Can't hear you, Tim.
Fantastic.
Tim, I think you're muted.
That is 100% true. That was a super cool intro to what you do, and kudos because I could not tell what was real and what was
Yeah.
virtual and how far,
So well
and
blended.
so blending was, I mean, that was just seamless because we'll have a question about that in a little bit here. A very generic, basic question, real quick. Did you watch the show or play the game? Have you seen the show or have you played the game beforehand?
I saw the whole show, and I've watched my son play the game.
Hmm.
Got it.
I I'm sad to say I'm not a huge gamer. I am more of the artist, and I like creating the games. And for me, I'm just not good at it. So for me, great games, challenging games are like Lego Harry Potter, Lego Star
Oh,
Wars,
I love it.
Minecraft. So
I mean,
One of
to
my
me, that's
favorite Lego Harry Potters. Me and Tim used to
it's
play
so
that all the
good.
time.
yeah.
I'm playing Stardew Valley.
Yes,
Like simple games.
we
I
love
don't
Stardew here.
not.
Oh yeah.
It's so
Big
good.
big fans.
So I haven't played Fallout myself.
Hmm.
Again, my son is the gamer of the family, and watched him play many a times. But I did watch the whole show. Of course, I wanted to see where all the work was and watched all the way through. And I have so many questions as to are they going to continue it the next season or not?
Mm,
That's good to know
okay,
that
yeah, that
you
kind of
don't even
actually
get
leads
that.
into our next question is like how long was like the production of the show in total, and how long was your involvement in it? Like, could you kind of give us like a brief timeline of as to like how the journey kind of starts for you and the show?
So I was working at a company called Magnopus, and they do a lot of different hats. They're based in Los Angeles, and I first was working on Westworld, and that was with Jonathan Nolan. And so we had the connection there, and he was like, I'm going to be working on a new project on Westworld. We had a large LED volume in Los Angeles. We did for season 4. There are two different scenes in two different episodes of season 4 where you see Times Square, New York City, but it's in the future.
Mm.
So New York's, Times Square has removed all cars, and it's all, trees, and there's kind of modern architecture and new buildings, and all the LED, billboards have very specific things on them. So we recreated Times Square, New York City. We had 6 weeks to do the whole thing, and before shoot day, and we spent 3 days shooting it on this set, and they built a little bit of the physical set, and then the rest of it was virtual. So we're using Unreal Engine game technology, so that when you move the camera in the physical space, the game engine follows the tracking of that real world camera, and it's like having a game controller connected. So what you see through the camera's lens, this is not a video screen just playing an image.
Mm.
This is if I move the camera, the whole wall warps and moves to
Wow.
match how the camera is moving in virtual space. You get this feeling of parallax. So when the camera pans up, you see off into the wall and into the distance. It's so convincing that I remember there was a scene, it was a big battle sequence that happened there, and there was a bunch of dead bodies, and the actor was walking through them, and the director was like, "Keep walking." She's like, "I can't. I've reached the wall." Where like you see off into the distance, and she literally walked until her nose was touching the LED wall and couldn't go any further. But to the camera, it looked like an infinitely long place. So it's pretty cool. So we made the connection there. Magnopus already had worked with him before, and they knew they were working on Fallout. So this was January of 22. I started on that, so this was 2 full years ago.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah, and that's when we started working on Fallout. And this was our section of it was just one small portion. They had already been working on it for quite a while, so I worked on it for almost a full year,
Hmm.
almost 2 years ago.
Oh
Wow.
So
wow.
Okay.
production takes a long time on these projects.
Yeah, and on that, I was just wondering, like, could you kind of maybe walk us through like what a typical day on set is like, and as opposed to what a day off set is like? I don't know how often you were like actually working on set.
So I think I want to describe a little bit more about what virtual production is, because
Hmm.
not a lot of people understand this. I think many people do understand what post production is, and this is where they write the script, they get the actors, they rehearse things, they go to set, they have a big green screen for their visual effects, they shoot the actors acting in front of a green screen. Once all the plates are brought off of camera, you get a visual effects studio like you have these shots. So add in the city here and a monster here and all the things that are happening in post production, and you take the green background, remove it, and you just have the characters, and then you add your computer graphics additions and his set extensions and the matte paintings and all that fancy stuff in post production. And you take a long time to kind of merge this together. What we do with virtual production is kind of flipping this on its head. So we do all of the visual effects first before you get to set. So we have to work with the art director, we have to work with the production designers, we have to work with the director to say, what do you want the world to look like? We build the whole world months before we get to set. And then when we get there, they build just the only the portion that's going to be physical, and the rest of the set is our world. So when the actors are acting, they're not in front of a green screen, they're in front of the actual final visual effects of that world, and they can see it with their own eyes, and the lighting affects them. This is the beauty of virtual production. It's only one aspect of virtual production. Virtual production is also the pre-planning, the pre-production, where they plan the cameras. And because we have this whole world in Unreal Engine, we actually did virtual production with the directors and production designers where they had VR goggles and they could go and pre-plan where their cameras would be. We could pre-plan where our gaffer wants to put the light sources, the physical lights, to accent what the digital world would be. And we could talk about, we could move the sun around and just try to find the right angles. We could change the mood and the light and the fog and really play with all of the look of what we wanted for the film in pre-production, virtual production, before we ever got to set. So I was working from January until June on these environments, and we had a team of 12 artists and in our studio. So we built multiple sets for Fallout. So there's multiple locations. The entire, when they're in the vault, everything where you see the cornfield. So they come out of the vault, and then there's this place where they have the wedding. There's a big battle that takes place here. There's multiple times a day. That was all virtual production. Wow. So we had picnic tables
Blew my mind.
and 3 rows of corn, and that's it. That was
Wow.
all that was physical. Everything else was virtual production with the wall.
Yeah, because it looks like almost a full gym, almost like when you look at it in the actual show.
Right. And then there's a scene where they shoot the projector, because it's supposed to be a 3D analog projector off of these little warbling things that gives you the appearance of parallax. So like when you first see it and the camera pans down, you're like, that's farmland, and it's not farmland. It's supposed to look like a much bigger room that has this projector. And when they, hit the ceiling, hopefully there's no spoilers, too many spoilers there with this. The film actually catches fire and then burns. And as they're having this big sequence, this fight sequence, the film is burning in the background, and we were responsible for generating all of that effects ahead, so that as the film burns and the light changes and the projectors go out, all of those lighting transitions were coming through the wall, and we had to time that with all of the extra lights that they had on the ceiling so that it could all feel like it's really happening and it's all interacting. The other scenes that we did, when they leave the vault, so they come up through the elevator and you're in the top of the elevator where the vault opens to the outside, that was all virtual production as well. So we built all of that. The only thing that was physical was the walkway they were standing on. Everything else was, the door itself was half physical, half virtual. So when they opened that door, they actually had a big piece of like plywood in the shape of the door that moved back, and then they replaced some of that in post-production. So there still is post-production, there still is visual effects, like the big thing that comes down and collects to the door and opens it up, that was done in post-production visual effects. But the rest of the room that you see all the way around, looking down into the vault below and the elevators and all that, that was all virtual production.
So convincing too.
That's nuts. So for on that kind of topic, like, So you're saying a lot of this was done on like the volume, which anyone who's familiar with like Disney and Star Wars, they had like the really big type volume and massive, and that became really big a few years ago when they kind of announced that. I think that was maybe like 9 years ago at this point.
Mandalorian.
So you worked with that a lot, it sounds like. Was there ever anything that was like that you know of that was like shot on like on location, or was most of this going to be done like on the volume? Like the one thing I can kind of think of is like when they first leave the vault and they kind of pan out to like this big arcing view of where the vault is in the world, like in California, and you see like I'm assuming Santa Monica and like walking across the beach and everything. One, I guess, did you work on that, and or was that volume? Was that live? Like how does that one? Do you know that kind of answer?
So the only thing that we did in the volume, and I only worked on the volume stuff, but I do know about the schedules of other places.
Nice.
Um, because so we did all of the farm type things, we did the vault door, and then the third thing we did was the vertibird. When it's flying, every time you see it's flying and you see in the cabin, that is actually a physical object that was built on set with us, and then they went out into um, somewhere in Utah and shot a bunch of footage. They had multiple 8K cameras. I think they had 12 8K cameras and then stitched together onto the wall. They had it on robotics. The
Wow.
whole thing is moving, and they had flashing lights to mimic the sunlight through the props flashing onto the characters. So everything in the vertibird was on our stage as well, and we were there for that. I do know that they went instead of like on location. Jonathan Nolan, he goes by Jonah. He loves doing as much physical as possible and only using virtual production when there was no other choice for it. They couldn't actually fly a vertibird. They couldn't build a vault big enough. They couldn't have the cornfield with the same scale that they wanted to. There was another scene that was done at the end in the observatory. Then the last episode, that's all virtual production as well. So when they get the interior of that is all virtual production, and it was just matte paintings projected with the parallax. Um, some of the images that are on that news article you can look at were from that. I do know that in the middle of production, while we were doing pre-production, that they left and they flew to Namibia because there actually is real places that have abandoned towns, and the big ship in the sand, that's not virtual, that's real. That's an actual ship that was beached in Namibia. I believe half of that town that's covered in sand is actual real post-apocalyptic like buildings, and they
Wow.
just
Wow.
went there and filmed there because it looks perfect, and you don't have to pay for new production. You just have to pay for the crew to fly there. I don't know any more details about that. I wasn't involved in that aspect of the script. I just knew that some of that was being done. The what is the name of the town that they go to?
Philly.
Yeah,
Billy.
Philly. Philly, I know was on set too. So we did some work. If you look in that article, there's an image that you can see of a very wide shot that's kind of warm, where you can see the vault doors and you can see the sets and you can see the sound stage. So that was in Brooklyn, New York, Steiner Studios. And so we
Oh,
went into Steiner Studios and photographed and did photogrammetry, which is 3D scanning of that environment. So they would film here and then look out. It looked like it was one environment, the way they cut it. So they filmed in Brooklyn and got all the shots that were on those walkways and on the stairs and where all the hallways and doors were. That was an actual physical set. And then we, from our stage, when they were another hour outside in Long Island where we shot, um, we had our virtual stage and we had to make a digital twin of the physical stage that was in the city. And so we had to match it 1 to 1 so that when you see it from a distance, the characters walk from it, it's virtual and it's all in the game engine. It's not real. And then we did set extensions and built more of that into that world too. So Philly was shot also in Brooklyn, and they actually put up a whole bunch of um, uh, box cars, or like
hmm.
the back of a semi. What do they call those, shipping containers?
Yep.
Hmm.
Yep.
And made a walled city of shipping containers, and then had Philly right there, right in the
Wow.
middle of New York City. Nobody knew what was going on at the time. It's pretty cool.
That's that's insane. Like just the scale of production on a
Yeah.
lot of this is pretty nuts.
It's
Um,
amazing to think how much money was spent, and I can't share the numbers, but I know the numbers
oh,
of just for our episodes. And like
Wow.
in the end, out of this entire season, probably 5 minutes of film was virtual production of what you see on screen that you know from our shots. And
wow.
it's astronomical the amount of money that was spent just for that. And like some
Get that
TV shows,
Bezos money though, so it's
it's
nothing
bigger
to
than
him.
some feature. It's bigger than some feature films that I've worked on for the entire film. Our part portion.
Jesus.
Um, so it's amazing to me. Yeah.
That's wow.
It was
Well, so
seamless though. Like
yeah,
from
Yeah.
virtual to like physical said, now that you're telling us that there's that distinction, I can't like physically see the difference like between the virtual and the physical
No.
like set that now you're talking about. I had no idea it was two different things.
Yep.
um, wow. Based on everything you've talked to us about and everything you went through, I'm curious what provided a unique challenge for you? Like, was there a particular character or scene that made your job more difficult or interesting?
Uh, Boy, that was a hard one to answer. There were so many challenges. Trying to figure out how to. Okay, one thing that was hard for us was Jonathan Nolan only works with film, and so there are
Oh,
unique challenges with
Right.
shooting film inside of an LED volume because LEDs are produced at only one company in the world. Basically, there's one company that runs all of the LEDs, and they produce them for street signs that you see and for jumbotrons and for virtual production, and there's a definitely a dominant market for that. And so we don't have higher quality or lower quality LEDs. There's just one company that produces them. So there's a certain color to the RGB LEDs. Like if I buy professional grade film lights that use LEDs, they can craft an RGB WW, means there's two white LEDs that can give, like the lights that I'm using in here are actually film lights and they'll have a good color quality. But for these LED walls, it's way too expensive to get those panels. And so there was a certain color red that didn't work on film, but it worked on every other camera. To my eye, it looked perfect. To my digital camera, it looked perfect. To a high-end digital reference camera, it looked perfect. But to the film on the RE camera, it didn't look right. So we had to reverse engineer and get a color scientist to help us figure out how to warp the color on the wall using something called a lookup table to invert this so that it looks perfect on film and it looked crappy to our eyes and like this looks strange. But we knew that when processed through the film, it would look good. And there was just a lot of technical challenges
Jesus.
with this. The other thing is that we were using new technology. So if you're familiar with game engine technology, um, Unreal Engine 5 came out right before we shot. And so I believe there's a thing called Lumen, and this is real
Yep.
time global illumination. Look into it if you want to know more about it. But it is traditionally game engines, you have to bake in that lighting. So any of the light that bounces, you do tricks and hacks to make it work. But the new version of Unreal lets that light be calculated in real time. And we were like, "This is brand new." It was only 2 weeks old when we were on set, and we're like, "Do we use this or not?" And like, no one else has ever done this. What could happen? Let's try it out. So the vault scene as the door was opening, that was the first. I believe it was the first use of Lumen in virtual production ever in the world because it was only 2 weeks old,
Wow.
and that caused us all kinds of hell.
Oh.
Because it Epic Games didn't have the support of it. So if running on one computer, it's fine. But we had 12 computers that were all syncing multiple, generations of Unreal Engine at the same time, all synced together to get the resolution needed to be on these giant walls. That I mean, the stage that we worked on was massive. It was one of the biggest in the world, and the wall
Wow.
we actually our company helped build the wall, so it was 100 feet long, 30 feet tall, and 75 feet wide.
Jeez.
It's huge wall. So we could have the full vertibird in the space. And it's 30 feet tall and there it is in the middle, and it was tall enough to be able to do it. So imagine having the pixel width of it is like you have a 4K TV. Imagine 12 8K TVs all stitched together, and that's what we're using.
Wow.
So it's
Jesus.
huge amount of pixels.
That's, I mean,
Wow.
that's,
Incredible.
and like I've seen a volume type stage. Full Sail University actually has one at their campus, and I had the wonderful opportunity to tour that and see what they do there for student use. And it's big. Don't get me wrong, but like what you're describing is
This
like,
is easily 10 times the size of
yeah,
this one.
massive. So and when I go there, I'll see if I'll take some more pictures for reference and throw those things up on my Instagram and stuff and make another short. So when you're seeing this in the future, look for more and then look for what I post and you'll see bigger than that, because I was overwhelmed when I saw this volume at like a Florida technical college, essentially is what it is. A little bit better than that, but like being able to then describe something that's 10 times the size of that is just insanity. So you were doing a lot of firsts. You were one of the first to use Lumen in that capacity. You were building some of the largest sets and volume type stages. That's nuts to me.
And it's
I
changing
can't.
so much that it's old news now. Two
Wow.
years
Yeah.
later, they're like, there's stages way bigger than this and brand new technology. So like it was evolving as we went and how we put the lights into it. So it was a lot of fun. It was also cutting edge technology means that it's sharp and it hurts because you're literally on the cutting edge. And sometimes when we would have a failure, the failure would be hard and we'd have to reboot the system and it takes 15 minutes to reboot. So we had a couple of times on set where we have 200 people sitting and waiting
Ugh.
15 minutes for us to just reboot and hope that it doesn't happen again. Because we shot for we were on set for 2 months. The actual number of production days, I think we had 3 days for each, 3 actual shooting days, but there was pre-production days and cleanup and building out the new sets and taking this in and out, and we're trying to do the final adjustments to the lights and everything at the same time as the crew is building a brand new set. So it was a lot. It was a lot of work. And it was a lot of fun.
So, Jeremy, you said that like you never played any of the like games before you worked on this, but you were like familiar with the franchise. My question kind of is about that, and like on set and just in general, did they give you like a guide? Was there someone that's a consultant who worked with you about like the looks of the show? Was there like, I know sometimes they give you like a Bible for the show with like all the information and background and reference images and things like that. So what did you guys sort of use as a reference? Because obviously you've probably haven't seen like a giant vertbird before in real life and don't know how it looks like and things like that, or never lived in a vault, so you're not quite sure how that looks like. So what did you use as a reference? Did they provide any of that for you?
So the production designer Howard that was his job, was to kind of keep the art united, and we did a huge amount of research. Again, we were on this project months before it went to set. So we played the games. I didn't play the game, but we got screen captures from it. We had certain people that was their job, production assistants, to just go through, play the games, get the images, work with Howard, the production designer, and look at what was in the game, what we want for the set. And there was this back and forth because we were building the virtual worlds months ahead, and sometimes that would influence the physical set. Like we had the vault door, they built it, they painted it, they had art directors who came in and painted the whole wall. And then as we turned on our virtual world, we had a lot more rust and we had a lot more grit and like drips. And they were like, that looks so good. So they had to bring in the art directors again and add more rust and more drips to make the two mesh perfectly. And, all the art directors were like, your work is so cool. And I was talking to them and like, your work is so cool. It's so amazing to watch this thing. The level of detail that's in these things. I was on the physical sets and I could see that what they built, and it's not like it looks good only on camera. I could go up to it and touch it and get my face right up close to it, and like that looks like rust, but I know it's just paint. It looks so believable, and then you come around the back of it and like that's plywood and painter's tape, spray painted, but from the front it looks like metal. It looks like 1950s real, old thing. The vertebrate itself was built with actual kind of components and materials. It was brand new, but they aged it so well that it felt like going on a World War II, aircraft carrier, that type of like it felt so legit. It was amazing.
That's thank you for doing this, Jeremy. This is awesome. Things I didn't even. I did not anticipate how educational this was going to be, and I'm very grateful for that. I guess my question is just, what was a memorable moment for you, whether it's pre-production, during, or behind the scenes, something that you're going to remember for many years to come from working on this show?
I mean, I think just standing on set, probably the moment that the door opens and Lucy goes out into the world, and knowing that I was sitting there right behind camera, just waiting because we had a virtual set component that needed to trigger at the right time, and we're all in headsets, and there's just this huge amount, this huge crew, and Lucy's, the actor's standing 4 feet from me, and we're having to, like, as this physical light turns on, our virtual lights have to turn on, and I'm talking to the people at the brain bar in the back, my artists who are actually running everything, and just that moment of connection to go, this is just cool, man. It's fun to be in those moments where you like, I'm seeing with my own eyes this whole thing, happening, and knowing that it's going to be a part of television history, and just like, I don't know if the show's going to be good or not. I don't know what it's going to be, but it's still exciting to be involved in that process and working with these people. I remember afterwards too, something that was great for us is that Jonah Nolan took us out for a meal and just, like, thank you, this is amazing. And we just went to a really fancy restaurant in New York and hung out together. And I got to have a 20-minute conversation with him about the future of other things that they want to do and other projects that were coming. And that's fun. That's just cool to interface with people who've worked on so many projects and seeing where their vision of the future is and what they want to do versus where it is right now. I wish I could share more about that, but I can't. But I will remember those moments. I think it's pretty awesome.
Well, I think I can speak for the rest of the modern nerd and myself when I say that this was probably the best video game adaptation to screen ever.
Yeah.
I couldn't tell you anything. This was the best one. So
Yeah.
Was it good? Yes, it was very good.
I think it's like amazing that you guys use like Unreal Engine, which is, I mean, technically video game technology for a show about a video game. So it's like kind of full circle kind of feel to it. I love it.
Yeah.
We also had inside of the vault, there is a virtual production volume because you see the farmland, and then when the projectors go out, there's just metal wall that's there. So we had a LED volume inside of an actual LED volume showing an LED volume. And it's just kind of like, it's the same type of thing. It's like, yep, philosophically, that's kind of funny. There's supposed to be film projectors, and the room was significantly larger than our actual space. So yeah, we're using game engines to produce a virtual game inside of a virtual world with physical actors. Like,
it's just, yeah, all sorts of loops.
That is absolutely bonkers. I mean, you kind of answered my last question that I was going to ask, because I was going to kind of gear it more towards like Jonathan Nolan, because like working with him and everything like that. But like, what were like kind of your interactions with some of these actors that were on set that you were there for? I know you mentioned that you saw Lucy McLean, or Ella Purnell as her real name is. Like how, like, this is just me kind of being a nerd. Like how were they nice? How were they, were they cool? How was it kind of just interacting with some of them? Do you still kind of nerd out in these situations when you're interacting with an actor or a director or something like that, per se?
So I think when you get on set, or when you're in these circumstances where you see famous people, I remember, I'm going to rewind before I answer that question and talk about what it was like at Pixar, because we had a policy. We would have a lot of people that would come in. There'd be famous people all the time. You're just like, you're having lunch and suddenly there's Scarlett Johansson just sitting over there, or there's Bono, or there's, the king of France, there's Michelle Obama, there's whoever that had just happened to be in the studio because it's so famous. And our policy was they are professionals, treat them like human beings and professionals, no geeking out. So you never asked for autographs, you never asked for photos, you never, you know, treat them as if they're here for work, because most of the time they are. And they're here to do some recording or because they're fans. Like I remember one day that there was suddenly, like, we would always see, you know, a big limo out front. You're like, all right, somebody here is famous, and then you're like, oh, there's Tom Cruise. All right, you know, he's not doing a voice. He just happens to be in the studio. He was in town. He wanted to see it, and he's there, and we just treat him, you know, normal. One day there were like 10 black military SUVs, and then there was security people with guns, and we're like, what is going on? It was the King of Jordan. You know, and he just was a big fan and wanted to be there, so they had to bring in snipers to protect him because at all times, wherever he goes.
Wow.
And
Jesus.
so for me, being on set is very much the same thing. To be like, your crew. Crew is not there to be a nerd. So I didn't interact much with the actors because, like, they have a job, we have a job, they've rehearsed. We're just trying to get this done as quick as possible. So I had a couple of interactions, you know, where what's the father's name that he's searching for? The actor. He was in the original Dune.
Yes. He
Yeah.
played Paul in the
I can't
original.
remember his name.
Yep. Anyhow, he came back to the Brain Bar, which is this row of computers that were controlling everything on the screen, and he was just kind of curious. And he was like, he had sat down in one of our chairs, just kind of resting a little bit in between takes, and he's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I'm not in your way, am I?" And like, this is so cool, and what you're doing is really cool, and like, well, what we see on set is really fun too. So it's more of a professional environment where you just kind of like stand back. One of the actors, I won't say who, forgot the name of their assistant and reached over to me like, do you remember this person's name? I feel really bad. They're bringing me snacks and I didn't catch their name. Like, I'm sorry, I don't know.
That's kind of awesome.
Yeah. You know, they were all really professional, really nice. Most of the people when I've worked with on set have been fantastic. Super professional. They're waiting around with the moment that they say go, they act the whole scene. I think this is a difference between shooting indie films on my own with family and friends where we're making up the story as we go and we're trying to figure things out versus being on set. The reason why professionals are there is because they've rehearsed everything and they have multiple cameras, and when they say, you know, action, they do a 5 to 7 minute scene flawlessly, and they have multiple cameras rolling, and everyone just like, boom, everyone else is silent. You don't move, you don't breathe, you just let the acting happen. Cut, everything moves, resets, and do it again. Other angles, other takes, and just fly through the production. So the actual filming goes crazy fast. It's all the prep work that takes forever. And that's the pre-planning, like a whole pre-shoot day where we have film cameras in there and we have stand-ins for the actors so that when the actors get on set, they do their acting and then they leave. So like, it's a system.
Sure.
It's the only way to do it when you're dealing with hundreds of millions of dollars of budget. You better be prepared to do it right the first time on the first take if you can, and that way it lets the creative team, the actual directors, really be able to play because they know where they can push the boundaries, where they can't. We try to communicate with them. What can you do? What can't you do? And we do that in the early days ahead, like on Westworld. We're like, you can move the sun this far, you can look this far, you can change things in the background. And the day before the shoot, they're like, can you add a little spot of sun over there? Can you do this? And sometimes when they're in the actual shots, they would call back to me and be like, Jeremy, we need you to change this, get your team to change that thing. You know, and I want this now from this particular angle. We need a little bit of darkness behind the character's head, so let's pull out some of the light off the wall there, and let's add a little highlight over here. And we just have to be ready for all of that on the fly, on the go, and just be really on top of when they say record, we're ready to go. Everything's flawless. So
That's
yeah.
That's cool. I mean, it's good to know that it is like, like a very professional thing, and obviously everybody's there for their job and to do work. So, that's why I'm not in the film industry. I'd be out there like, oh my God, they're right here. This isn't like, I would obviously that would probably go away if after over time you'd be like, all right, yes, it's just another day. There's Scarlett Johansson, there's Ella Purnell, there's whoever. So that aspect of it is pretty cool. Um, I mean, there was so much to digest of what you told us. That was, we so much more than I anticipated. We are definitely at time for this interview. But man, again, from
Thank you
all
so
of us
much.
here, yeah, at the Modern Nerd, thank you for doing this and taking the time, to sit down out of your busy schedule and just tell us a little bit about what you do. Do you have any plugs? Anything you want to promote at the last minute, to let people know what you're doing? Anything they can look forward to?
Yeah, I mean, I teach cinematography, lighting, illustration, art direction. So I have my own website if anyone's interested in learning more about this, lightingmentor.com. That'd be cool if you're interested in learning about how lighting works in more detail. I have that as an option. Um, Otherwise, I'm just happy to share in the geekitude of this all. I mean, we all just love this. So I'm in this industry because I love what I do. I can't imagine doing anything else, and I'm glad that I'm not doing accounting or something like that. I'll
True.
much prefer what I'm doing. Thank you again for inviting me. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you so
Uh,
much.
yes,
you.
thank you. I would love to do more of these. Stay tuned, obviously, everyone, for more content coming forward. My brain is reeling from all of this information, so I'm going to stumble through this outro here. Anyone watching, thank you so much for watching. If you've had a good time, we've been the Modern Nerd, and thank you for watching.